Welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to see you here, and it will be wonderful to hear from you shortly. What I want to do is something that I really like to do when I remember to do it, and that is to ring this bell once. Well, there it went. I'm going to ring it again. And just let that one bell be your signal to just let go, you know. I know y'all are used to these kinds of instructions. They're really kind of lovely, actually, to feel like it's really safe to just put down whatever you might be carrying. Think about, imagine it leaving outside your front door. And if you want to go get it afterwards, you can. So let's just take a moment, just a single moment to arrive. So as we're sitting in this really beautiful moment, let yourself really feel whatever kind of furniture or the floor, wherever you're seated, and let yourself arrive in your seat. And let the seat also come to meet you so that you actually can let go. You can really feel, I am supported. I don't have to hold myself up here. And if you can find any places, you do a little body scan. If you can find any places where you're holding on, you can really lovingly and gently invite that part of you to also let go. And so, as we really gently open our eyes and kind of come back into our virtual room, as you're doing that, see if there's an intention of your heart. See if there's anything of a personal intention that you want to put into the practice tonight. I super want to be here. I want to think of so-and-so. I want to feel supported, whatever might be a kind of sweet and personal intention, and see if you can bring that back with you. And I would like to suggest that you also bring the intention that as we're going through our practice tonight, keep checking back in to remind yourself that you're supported. And keep checking in with your body. That's a very kind thing to do. To see if there's, oops, it's caught on again, and invite it to let go. So in the world of things I want to be sure to say, first of all, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you. Many people have been very generous with their dana, and we still haven't figured out how to let people know that we got it, but we're getting it. So I just want to thank you for your generosity. It's much appreciated. And periodically I get notes from people. I really do try to answer them, but you know, sometimes that could be a really slow process. So I wanted to mention that. And I also want to invite you to put into the chat box any people or any issues, anything that might be of concern for you right now, whether it's a personal concern or a collective concern, to please put that in the chat box. And I think I just invite us all to read those things as we're together here tonight, so we can feel and see what's on people's hearts and minds. And I want to actually, a couple of things I do want to call out is that the COVID thing is still really a big stress. I was reading in North Carolina, the numbers are going back up again. I think that's happening in different places in the country. People are still dying. So I just want to put that in there. And along with that, I want to put something I was reminded of today. And I was talking to a friend of mine that when people are in really super stressful situations, or maybe they've been super depressed, and then all of a sudden things start to look hopeful and there's some energy coming up of hopefulness, that can also be a really difficult time because, well, maybe I shouldn't be hopeful, or who knows what's going to really happen. And I also think that, we're all anxious to be with people again, to do some of the activities we used to love to do. But I think there's also a lot of anxiety about doing those things. And as individually and also collectively, this has been a hugely traumatic experience. So I think that business of hoping and wanting to leap in could also be met with some difficulty and tension. So I just want to mention that, and all the people that have been affected by COVID directly and indirectly. And then I want to thank Shayla. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correct, because that was one of the things I wanted to mention, is the city of Minneapolis and the trial of Derek Chauvin. And I also want to mention, I hope I'm pronouncing names right, Dante Wright, who was just killed recently. And I got an email from the ACLU, and as many of these emails start, he should still be alive today. And in the email, it said there have been 281 other police shootings just in the first quarter of this year. And we don't, yes, thank you, his family, friends, and community members. I also want to say I had a very interesting experience recently that I want to share with y'all. And I just want to invite you to do with this what feels right for you in this moment. But I'm in an ecumenical group that I really treasure. And one of the members of the group is the executive director of the Zen Peacemaker Order. And he organized a vigil after the shooting in Boulder. And he wanted to put 11 candles, which would have included the shooter who also got killed. And a lot of people just couldn't stand that. And so he didn't do it just because he didn't want to upset people more. But I do think, to the extent that our hearts and psyches, honestly, are big enough to include all the players on all sides, the families of all the people who are involved. Lord knows we don't know all the multiple factors that cause people to, and causes and conditions, as the Buddhists would say, that cause people to arrive at places where they do such things. So as big as our hearts can be to include as many possible people in our prayers, I invite you to do that, but only what feels right for you in the moment, because I think our hearts can get bigger as some of the shock wears off too. So I wanted to mention both of those situations and also the COVID situation. And I'm just aware of some people I know personally whose family elders are really sick and dying and need extra care, and the siblings are squabbling, which is really hard and painful for the siblings. And I just want to put those kinds of situations, I can think of those people in particular without calling their names, but those kinds of situations of dealing with tough family situations. I just want to put that in there because sometimes that calls for a big expanded heart, and it can be, yeah, it can be tough. So, and I'm happy to see that you all are doing this. It's really wonderful. So thank you. And so to say, we're going through, I put this on my website, etc., that we're going through the mandala, the 21 Taras, in the order that they're in the book. And this was the order in which my teacher had them, and the order in which we translated the sadhanas together so many years ago. He translated, I edited. I don't do Tibetan. I wish I did, but I don't. So I want to be sure that I'm clear about that. But somebody wrote me an email and asked me, was there any rhyme or reason to the order? And I said, actually, if there is one, I don't know that. And because they come from so many different lineages, and even within a lineage, they can be a little bit different. They can also be remarkably consistent, both. But yeah, I haven't seen an explanation for why they are in the order that they're in, or at least why they were from back in the day. So what I want to say, though, about the order in particular is that this dark red victorious Tara is the first of the wrathful Taras in the mandala. And I think that is, I have to say, of course, I've said this before, I get accused of, I always say I love this one so much, and everybody says, oh, you love them all. Well, I do, but the wrathful deities have a very special place in my heart. My sense of them, they are wrathful protectors. So their wrath is not directed towards us. Their wrath is directed towards our obstacles, which I'll have more to say about in a minute. They really are protectors. And some people refer to the wrathful protectors as being beings of fierce compassion. And my sense of that is there's nothing that can knock them off the seat of compassion. There's nothing you can bring to them, offer to them, ask for help or protection from them that their compassion is not just vast enough to hold. So I want to say that as the introduction to this Tara, and I also, with a little bit of humor, was tempted to say, sometimes on the radio you say there can be difficult, the person will say there could be difficult content here, so you might want to turn the radio off. I don't think you want to turn your computer off, but I think this Tara really does invite us to think about really difficult things. And I want to talk about those specifically. And I also think in conjunction with that, we are also invited to think about what brings us joy. Because, the enlightened consciousness, the awakened consciousness that Tara is embodying, is mirroring back to us, for sure letting us know that is our basic nature. We have that enlightened consciousness within us, is just so vast it can hold everything. So things don't split off into bad, good, either or, whatever. Jung had a thing he loved. This is maybe one of his core parts of his theory. He called the tension of the opposites. So holding, for Westerners, we really do have this, well, this is good and this is bad. And he would suggest holding the tension of those opposites until a third thing from what's greater, or the transcendent, actually arrives that dissolves the tension. And I would say that would mean it has to include parts of each. And one of the things I love, I think this is the title of a novel, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And the jacket cover, the jacket cover is a statue. And now there are a lot of these people have these as yard statues. It's a young woman. I don't know if I can do this, that you can see it. Anyway, she's got her hands like this, and actually there's a bird bath in each one, but I like to think of that midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. She's holding both. And the being in the middle is us. So I think when we're doing that mighty work, which is a mighty work to try to hold the tension of these conflicting feelings, it's pretty fantastic to also have this view that they are actually related to each other and they're part of a much bigger whole, and that our job is try to investigate all of that. So, the chapters have an epigraph at the beginning. I think that's the right word. With her dark red light, she illuminates the deep imprints that propel you into feeling alone and isolated. And so one of the things I really want to talk about is, what are those deep imprints? And I think it's so important to be able to think about them in a very respectful way. One of the things that Rinpoche said when he gave over this initiation years ago, that when this talks about Tara, subduing all these demons and zombies and other harmful beings, he's talking about the biggest obstacle. They represent obstacles. The biggest obstacle to waking up is this belief in a separate self. And that's often, the term that's often used for that is self-grasping. And in the West, we translate that really quickly into selfishness. And then we can get into our good, bad, and all that stuff. And as women, we often feel like we should be anything but selfish. We should certainly not think of ourselves. We should always put ourselves last, et cetera, et cetera. I say a lot about that. The term self-grasping actually really means grasping at the sense of a separate self. That sense of being a separate self, away from the whole interdependent web of being, is generally our source of the greatest suffering. And so if we're going to seriously entertain that idea that the biggest obstacle is grasping at this idea of a separate self, we need to understand what is it that leads us to do that. Or even what is it that triggers us into a mind or body state that we would be doing it before we even know that we're doing it. So before I get into that, I really do want to say that I think one of the loveliest ways of sort of gently looking at this idea of not being this self, this solid, unchanging self, is something that Thich Nhat Hanh taught, I think, also decades ago, as a way of giving a blessing for a meal. And he also had this thing that he loved to do, which was to hold up a piece of paper and say, "What is this?" And everybody would say, "It's a piece of paper." And he said, "Well, no, really, what is it?" Well, it's a tree. And then people would say, "Well, you can't have a tree without the sun and the earth and the water." But then he would go a whole lot further, and you realize, well, you wouldn't have the piece of paper without the paper manufacturing company. You wouldn't have that without the trucks that brought the trees. You wouldn't have that without the lumberjacks or the secretaries who signed the legal agreements, or the people who fed the people who worked at the factory, or the farms that produced, so ultimately, how he, with that example, he would lead us into this place of realizing the entire world is in that piece of paper. And that piece of paper would not exist were it not for the entire world. It's really a beautiful thing to contemplate. And one of the things that I like to do myself, and I invite you to do it too, is you can think about, well, how was I feeling before I came to this meditation practice? And how do I feel now? And no matter what the difference is, there's no way you feel exactly the same. And so what that suggests is that just the fact that we're in each other's presence can change how we experience ourselves. And actually it can change hormones and chemicals and all kinds of things. So we are constantly changing, and we're constantly changing as part of the infinite number of factors that are moving around us all the time and that we're moving through all the time. So to me, looking at the trees, thinking about the microbes, thinking about the fungi, that's a very pleasant and gentle and easeful way of coming into some sense of, no, I really belong to all this. I'm part of all this. I belong to all this. I can't be separate. Actually, it's not possible. And the reason I like to have something that involves beauty and fun and even a little bit of the intellect is because sometimes this idea of giving up that identity is terrifying, actually terrifying. And it's much more than a simple intellectual exercise or truly understanding Buddhist philosophy. It is that. And it can also really be terrifying to let go of identities. And I also want to say that, ultimately it's so interesting when you listen to Black theologians and sometimes people who are really embedded in the Black church, this deep and profound idea of being a child of God is one of the things that helps them fend off this, horrific societal, oh, you're not worth anything. I hear this also when I listen to the great teachers who came out of Germany, out of the Holocaust. This idea of being a child of God is the ultimate identity in those kinds of traditions. In the Buddhist tradition, the idea that my nature is basic goodness, my basic nature is vast and empty and spacious, my basic nature is Buddhahood. There are a lot of obstacles in the way, but that is my basic nature, brings a lot of comfort, I think. And it's not just comfort, it's extremely important to have a relationship with those ideas. Well, how do I feel about that? What do I think about that? And at the same time, that's the ultimate identity. Okay, so the relative identity has everything to do with, race, gender, identities, preferences, sexual preferences, all these things where we've paid dearly to have certain identities. And at some point, we want to celebrate those identities that we now feel we can actually claim. And at the same time, my feeling is getting too caught up in any one identity can really give you that solid feeling of separateness. I'm different from so-and-so or so-and-so or so-and-so. So in the realm of the difficulty of letting go of this identity, it does have to do with, well, we've got to live in relative existence. And if we don't pay attention to some of those identities at different points, we can really get hurt. I also want to say, as mammals, human being mammals, we have a limbic system that is actually wired to protect that sense of a self. It's our mammalian body self. And I use the word primitive not to mean bad, early, undeveloped. Just primary. That primary thing that that is wired into us so that we know what's wrong and we might be able to avoid a threat, it's really going to reinforce that sense of a separate self. And so I think we have to have some compassion for the way we exist as physical beings in the world, and that there are certain systems that are operating towards protecting that separate being. You know, I talk about it, the deep imprints that can lead us into these feelings, and that's about as deep as it gets, actually. And then right above that level, I think we have the world of trauma. And this is where I think having the wrathful deity is super important, because if we, either through our practice or, you know, if we're in therapy or we're doing body work or whatever we're doing, and in some sense, I think it's somewhat of a responsibility. I need to understand what it is that triggers my particular sense of being isolated and alone and separate, so that I can work on releasing that on all kinds of different levels. But if you do that work, you can bump into some really difficult stuff. So, you know, in particular, when you get into areas like neglect and abandonment and abuse, where there is either help is needed and the help doesn't come and the help never does come, as you know, that happens as a child, either because of your own family or because of your skin color and the culture you belong to. The idea that there have been times, and they could be so early, they can be really early. I mean, I wrote about this in the book, you know, when I was a baby, the in vogue way to raise babies was to put them on schedules. You know, moms were not, lots of moms, most moms were not nursing on demand. They had babies on schedules. And, you know, no infant or young baby has a stomach that's big enough to hold enough food to last to meet that schedule. So when an infant is super hungry and nobody comes, it can be a complete somatic experience of starvation. And it's a complete limbic system, nervous system experience. And there's no neocortex there to moderate that. Oh, mom's tired, or mom's on a schedule, or mom's this or that. So sometimes we can bump into those deep feelings. And I think if you're in a system where you needed help and the help didn't come, that can certainly leave you feeling alone and isolated. So, and really frightened. And so then when we get to the point where we start realizing, I don't want to defend against this anymore. Because a lot of times the way we defend against it is by being uber busy, wearing ourselves out, not taking the time alone. You know, it's like paradoxically, we need to take time to be alone in order to actually experience the profound joy of solitude, which is different from loneliness. And there can be so much joy that arises in solitude. But if we won't ever let ourselves have it because we're afraid of being lonely and we're afraid we can't get through that experience to get to this other one, we're not going to meet that most basic need that we have for solitude. I think it's also true sometimes we just get super busy and we do things maybe we don't even want to do, or we have a lot of superficial interactions that aren't really very nurturing, because we're just as afraid to be alone. So I think one of the things that having a practice like this can do is it can help us bridge like if this is where this world of intentions comes also, if you begin to develop an intention of, I really want to experience the joy of solitude and the joy of intimate relationships, but maybe not so many relationships that don't really meet my needs. And you're going to change a pattern like that, even in a given moment, to get from this, the feeling of loneliness can sometimes, like I don't belong anywhere to anybody. It can be like I'm not comfortable in my own skin. Whereas the feeling of solitude can give rise to the feeling of I belong to everything. I belong to this vastness. Um, and I'm at home in myself. And so if we want to get from here to here, this is where the practice can really help. I think it can help because, there are the teachings, there's the story, there's the visualization, and there's what we're doing tonight, which is going through this. So we kind of understand what this is all about. And then the mantra itself. So the vibrations of those mantras can have such a powerfully settling experience for us. So, what I like to do is I make a bunch of notes and then I keep looking and seeing, have I said that yet? Whatever. But one of the things I really do want to say about this is I feel like this practice is really an invitation to develop fierce compassion for ourselves, and that we really need to take care and we need to be very tender with ourselves. So, one of the things that I know from personal experience, but also, trauma theory, and also even Jung's theory of complexes, was that they were autonomous energy fields. Does that sound like a demon? And that they'd had this archetypal core of energy that is autonomous and really would be recognized in any part of the world. They just dress up differently. So you've got this swirling negative energy, and you've got a cat that just jumped something over. You've got this swirling negative energy that starts sucking everything into it. And the way you know you're in one of those things is what your mind starts doing. And sometimes in Buddhist language, you call it making up stories. But for me, it's just following. And they are stories like, I'm not worth anything. I did that wrong yesterday. Gee, I shouldn't have said, or, and I think what both the teachings and the practice really invite us to do is to hold the space to start feeling these sensations in our body. A lot of times this really involves shame, which is really a body-based feeling. To see where we can locate in our body. Is there fear? Is there shame? Is there anxiety, exhaustion, dread, anger? And let those sensations, and often, everybody's a little different, but if I have that feeling of a rock in my stomach, I call that dread. For somebody else, dread might be, a contracted throat, but we can all know, these emotions for me tend to show up in my body looking like this. And to turn away from those thoughts, which will not take us anywhere at all. To tune into the body, to see what is going on here. And then to actually be able to say something quite simple to ourselves, which is usually something like, actually, I'm just scared. Or actually, I'm exhausted. Or actually, I'm lonely. Or actually, my blood sugar might be in the toilet. And that's part of this too, So, I think this is another way the practice can really help us. It's like you can stop your world, whatever's going on, if you're having these feelings, and do a practice. And sometimes that can be a short practice, like just, do the refuge prayers, do the mantras, do the dedication, or it can be doing a whole practice. It can also be true, which is what, I invite us to do tonight. is if you have things like this that you're really familiar with, that you struggle with, bring them intentionally to your practice. When you sit down to do this Tara, and just think, I'm going to invite all these parts of myself that experience all these things in these ways. So, when I look at, and maybe Deanna, you could put the praise in the chat box. Looking at the praise, I praise the one to whom Indra, Agni, Vayu, and the other powerful ones make offerings. So that's like saying, well, the gods are actually honoring Tara. Well, what are our gods? Gods, these can be that they are the very powerful Hindu gods, but sometimes for us, what is a god? God could be a promotion, or a god could be some person we uber admire, and we want to get their approval. Gods can sort of show up as attractive looking things, but they may not actually be what we need. And then it says she's honored by demons, zombies, and other harmful spirits who bow down before her. I really love this language, because especially zombies, you tend to think of them as things that suck out your life energy. And I really do think some of these thought processes do suck out our life energy. They kind of stop us in our tracks, and they can derail our creativity. So the idea that we might turn to Tara and ask for her help, so that we're not distracted by attractive looking things, but we're also not going down the tubes with these really, really damaging thoughts. So one other thing I wanted to mention, because I think it's just so great, but that the feeling of being separate, alone, and isolated really interrupts our sense of belonging. So going out in the natural world and looking at things and looking at them closely and seeing how you feel when you're looking at them can help remind us of that sense of belonging. I think Mother Teresa said something like this. I'm not quoting her exactly, that the lack of the sense of belonging, the loneliness, the lack of sense that somebody cares for me, was in her mind the biggest epidemic on the planet. Not malaria, not any of the multiple things she dealt with, but this sense of not being wanted, not belonging, etc. And I think it's really kind of a plague in Western society. There's so many different ways we can decide we don't belong. But I'm sure some of you all are familiar with Brené Brown, who's really good on these topics and who has a great sense of humor. And I was listening to a tape of hers one day, and she's like, so when you go into a room full of people, she said something like, for goodness sakes, the first thing you do, don't start looking around and figuring out how you don't belong. Don't start looking around for all the reasons you don't belong, because you'll find them. So how many of y'all have done that? You go to a new group. Yeah. You go to a new group that you really need to go to, you want to be in, and you start looking around. I'm not like any of these people. Right. But I just love the way she said, don't do that, because you'll find it if you're looking for it. Yeah. So I think humor is really useful in these situations. So the other thing is that I want to talk a little bit about is, what is it that actually triggers the feeling of not belonging, but what triggers the feeling of belonging? And I've got a couple of poems I want to read, and these I'm not going to put in the chat box or anything because, they're copywritten poems by people, and I don't feel like I have the right to do that. But these two things I want to read you actually came from a National Geographic magazine so many years ago. I don't remember. But I want to bring these two things in particular because it gives us the indigenous perspective. And these are indigenous people indigenous to North America. But I think these two things are really beautiful. So the first one is from Luther Standing Bear, who lived from 1869 to 1939. And he said, out of the Indian approach to existence, there came a great freedom, an intense and absorbing love for nature, an enriching faith in a supreme power and principles of truth, honesty, generosity, equity, and brotherhood as a guide to mundane relations. I think I'll read that again. I think it's so beautiful. Out of the Indian approach to existence, there came a great freedom, an intense and absorbing love for nature, an enriching faith in a supreme power and the principles of truth, honesty, generosity, equity, and brotherhood as a guide to mundane relations. And that, I'll just tell you quickly, reminds me of the Hasidic Jewish viewpoint of absolutely everything being sacred. Everything, the most mundane thing you could be doing, including washing the dishes or the floor, whatever, and the joy that comes out of when a person can live into that. So the second quote is from Black Elk, who lived from 1863 to 1950. And this I really love because I think it helps us try to shake our very precious species identity to think we're so special, we humans. Anyway, he said, perhaps you have noticed that even in the very lightest breeze, you can hear the voice of the cottonwood tree. This, we understand, is its prayer to the Great Spirit. For not only men, but all things pray to him continually in different ways. So I'm going to read that again. And again, there's the masculine pronouns, et cetera, these people living in the late 19th century. Perhaps you've noticed that even in the very lightest breeze, you can hear the voice of the cottonwood tree. This, we understand, is its prayer to the Great Spirit. For not only men, but all things pray to him continually in differing ways. So the thought for me that the plants and the trees and the beings are all praying in different ways, it helps me let go of my identity to some degree and also feel like I'm really part of something. So I think what I want to do now, because there are a couple, I want to read a couple more poems before we practice along these lines. But before I do that, I wanted to see on both of these things, if maybe 2 or 3 people would be willing to speak up about some sort of trigger that sort of throws you into that sense of being isolated and alone. If anybody would be willing to share that, and then if 2 or 3 people would be willing to share, what is it that triggers a sense of I'm absolutely part of everything, and the kind of joy that arises from that. And I would just say, just unmute yourself and jump in, because we're on 3 different screens and I won't be able to see you. I mean, you can use the raise hand function. Some people are good at that, some people not. But I would love to hear, I think we might all love to hear from some of you. Like, what triggers the feeling of being isolated and alone?
I think anytime I screw up, it can be major or minor, and it can even be like imagined. Like I imagine I've slighted somebody or something, and who knows whether they even see it the same way. It just,
I've
um,
had an experience lately where
I,
um,
Susan, Lisa was talking. I don't know if she
I'm
wasn't quite.
sorry.
That's all right. You go next. I don't think she was quite done.
okay. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. Oh, sweet. Yeah, just about. It's just, I react as though I'm the only person in the world who that ever happens to, and I'm just horrible. And I'm not, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example because I think that's like the body shame thing. And it's a good point that I also wanted to mention is that one of the things we can do when that happens is to think instantly of the countless other people who have felt exactly that way. And then we can bring them into our practice. I mean, what I'm talking about is not that easy to do, but thank you. That's a great example. Thank you. So, Susan, would you go next?
I'll try. I've been having this experience on Zoom lately, which you just experienced, of not, for some reason, being heard.
Huh.
And it's a really strange, it's
Wow.
like being in a room full of Italians and not having the language, and you can't be heard. And
Wow.
it's a really strange thing. And it really does make you feel like you're alone.
Yeah, I think that's a great example too. And I think for myself personally, when I have experiences like that, and it's profound. So there may be one part of me that wants to go, oh, what, how's that such a big deal? Yada yada. But when it strikes you in that way, you know it is. And so it's kind of an invitation to just go, oh wow, and sit with it and go, where did this start? It could have been, when I was 5 or whatever. But that I do think these small triggers in the current day can really knock on a door. And it's so powerful and important if we open the door. So thank you. That's another great example. And Martha.
I was just going to say, can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was just going to say that if you are a profoundly sensitive, empathetic person, as I am, and when people seem to have no compassion and act ugly, it always is like a knife in my heart. As many times as it happens, I'm always surprised by it, and I think that engenders a certain sense of separation for me.
Makes sense. Thank you. So could a couple of people step forward and say, well, what kinds of things in your world trigger the sense of belonging or wonder or awe or openness? So, Kylie, oh, Patty. Okay.
I just two things. The night sky in the river canyon of Utah.
Wow.
It's just it's usually where I go at the beginning of the Tara meditation. And then the other thing was yesterday listening to Tammy Simon interview Coleman Barks, this poet who translates Rumi.
Yeah.
Oh, and he was speaking his Rumi poems to his friend, and he was talking a lot about friendship in the interview. Play the cello. And it was what I would call expansive. So I thought, gee, I've got to remember that because I could get that and just listen to it when I need to.
Oh, thank you. And I love that you nailed it. It's expansion. And the other thing is the contraction. So it's really wonderful if there's something that can trigger the expansion. It's so healing.
Well, I don't know how to raise my hand. This is Oma.
Okay.
Part of my practice is trying to this. I hope this doesn't sound funny to a lot of people, but part of my practice is trying to merge my mind with the Dalai Lamas
Oh.
to actually do that kind of thing. And I realized at one point that I really had to expand because his mind, I feel like, is so vast. And so in order to merge my mind, I had to become more vast, and I had to have, like, I don't know, more of a vast mind. And that was kind of an interesting little insight that I got. Anyway, it makes me feel very good. And I can actually feel an expansion in my heart, in that heart chakra, getting, more expansive and lighter. And it makes me feel very good.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah. I was going to say that I notice a lot these days if I'm in a group and one or more people really has the courage to say what's real for them, way down underneath what might be considered appropriate or good or beautiful. And then, like, I was in a group the other day and all of a sudden, one person said, we were in a group on racism, and one person said, I'm just absolutely overwhelmed by grief these days. I don't know what to do with it. And then another person said, oh, I feel just the same way. And then there was this, just this huge feeling of, oh, we're all swimming in this river of grief. And it was so strangely comforting.
I don't think that's strange at all.
No, you wouldn't. I actually felt Tara was like right there in the room.
Uh-huh. And thank you for bringing that to us, because we can all share that too. I mean, I think that the river of grief, it's really there. And so that brings that to us. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I really like to hear from you all. And I appreciate people's willingness to step forward.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Karen had her hand up, but maybe she's one of our tech people. Before this goes any further, because there's certain things I just don't want to get off this call and say, oh my God, I forgot this. I do not want to forget to thank Mary Genzon. Is that right, Mary? Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you. And Diana Garcia Londoño and Karen Nelson. They're our awesome tech team. So I just want to say thank you to them, and also just to the whole Bumi Sparsha community for hosting us. And I think that Joan has her hand up, and I think, Joan, we will ask you to be our last person to say, or did you mean to put your hand up?
I did. I
Okay.
did. I can take these out. I can't hear and talk at the same time.
Okay.
I'm in a program of recovery from an addiction, and we talk to each other on that level all the time. We have to, because our lives depend on it.
Yeah.
The worst thing that anybody in that room can say is I'm fine, because it means they're isolating themselves and taking themselves out of the recovery that's available in the room. And it's been a powerful experience all of my, for 46 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. I can't believe it either. I mean, that's it, but it's been the greatest thing that has ever happened to me was to have that kind of ability to speak to people on that level. And I found it also in grief support groups. When my husband died, I felt totally alone, just totally alone. And in those rooms where people are speaking from their broken hearts, it's there, and it's really very powerful. And I'm grateful for it and the presence in my life.
Thank you. And I want to say, I was looking for this, but I must have left it on the porch. There's a wonderful article. It's from Lion's Roar 2018 by a man named Ezra Beda, Bayda, having to do with loneliness and aging. But one of the things that he did talk about, and I've already mentioned it, but Joan, you're speaking to it really, and Shayla also, that one of the most engaging, comforting, meaningful things that can happen are those kind of conversations. And so when any of us choose to step forward with that kind of meaningful comment or honesty, it just benefits everyone. And so even if it's a tough thing, because so many of us share the tough thing, there really is a sense of, I'm really not alone in this. And the community can hold that. So those are super good examples. So Karen.
Thank you. I wanted to raise the thought, and I feel very prompted by the last few shares, in fact, because in the part of thinking about the experience of not belonging, I just want to say, as a white person in America, that so many, and in Dharma centers and stuff, there's so much, it's a different kind of situation of feeling like a not belonging. I imagine that it can be for people of color who come and don't see so many people that look like them. And I just want to stand up and say that right now,
Okay.
So maybe that's one of those voices, perhaps, I hope, that somebody of color might feel seen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So in the world of what might make us feel like we belong, or what might trigger that feeling, this is a short poem that somebody from one of the Tara groups here shared a long time ago by Bertolt Brecht. It's a very simple poem. The first look through the window in the morning, an old book lost and found, enthusiastic faces, the snow, the change of seasons, newspapers, dogs debating, taking a shower or a swim, old music now appreciated, how to appreciate new music, comfortable shoes, to write, to plant, to travel, to sing, to be friendly. I especially like the to be friendly. And I want to read these two poems by Alice Walker, and then we'll practice. And then after we practice, we'll have a little time to see if there's anything anyone else wants to contribute. So again, this is from her book, Absolute Trust in the Goodness of the Earth. And the first one is pretty humorous, and I think it speaks to what we do when we're afraid of being alone. We are all so busy. We're all so busy. We say, I'm on fire to see you, but next week I'll be away in Boston. And the week after that, I have an important meeting in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo, a place I spend far too much time in myself. And then the second poem is more to what might bring us into the sense of belonging. And it's called When We Let Spirit Lead Us. When we let Spirit lead us, it is impossible to know where we're being led. All we know, all we can believe, all we can hope is that we're going home. That wherever Spirit takes us is where we live. And I think sometimes that Spirit can reach us when we're resting and not doing so much. So I think this is a good time to practice. And then, as I said, we'll have a little bit of time at the end if somebody wants to add anything. And, just to also, as what Karen was talking about, the way people can feel alone in Dharma settings. So to just encourage you all, if things happen here in this setting, that somehow that feeling gets generated here, that could be a good thing to say out loud. So now is the time to sort of shift a little bit more into this inner focus. And as we go into that inner focus, I can tell you what I always sense at this moment is gratitude. Just feel a lot of gratitude for the kind of holding that happens in an intentional sangha, the listening that can happen, the sharing that can happen, and that people just show up and there's this presence. So there's that sense for me anyway of this gratitude that arises right at this juncture. And also the gratitude for the practice, that we have the practice to go into now. So if you will shift your attention and do again what I was inviting you to do at the very beginning, which is really let yourself feel supported by whatever you're sitting on. And if you're sitting in a chair, on a sofa, whatever, and your feet are touching the earth, or that the furniture is touching the earth, to also feel the support of the earth that's underneath us, no matter where we are, what kind of building we're in, it doesn't matter. But to actually pay a little attention to your breathing, see what your breathing is doing naturally. Appreciate your breath and what it does for us, how it breathes us, how it supports us. And really, again, tune into if there are any places where you're holding, invite those places to let go. And then allow to come into your mind's eye whatever is the most precious image of space for you, to let that image arise and really pay attention to the vastness of it, the infinity of it, how space really can't even be comprehended. It's so vast. And it just contains everything. It rejects nothing, and everything that has ever been or is or will be emanates from space. And it is also then like our mothers giving birth all the time. It's also a wonderful image of what our actual enlightened consciousness is like. It is that vast and spacious. And so gazing into that image of space is a good reminder of what our internal spaciousness is like when we can let go of all the obstacles and put that stuff outside the door that we're talking about, including needing to get anything right, including the practice. And so we just breathe into the space and then to imagine that out of everything that could possibly present itself to us from space in this moment, we're going to invite the entire mandala of Tara to appear. And we just see that taking shape in front of us, not far from us at all, just kind of above our heads, a few feet away. And see green Tara in the center. This amazing female Buddha appearing in a subtle body of green light, just radiating wisdom and compassion in this female form. And then, back behind her are all the 21 emanations in their various forms, colors. And then surrounding, however you want to see this, sometimes I see these teachers around Tara and in the background between Tara and the other emanations. But you can see them also much closer to yourself. Your teachers, your guides, your guardians, your mentors, any ancestors that you feel are helpful and compassionate and really want to assist you, the healed ancestors that are here for our best interests. Just to imagine that circle of care. It's one way Lama Rod refers to them, which I really like. And these teachers may be living on this plane now or not. They may come from any tradition. We have teachers coming from all kinds of places. So whoever they are, from whatever tradition they come from, you could honestly say, were it not for them, I wouldn't even be in this place right now. I wouldn't be even interested in it. So think of them and imagine that they are really sending you love and well wishes and really supporting you, and that you can open to that and receive that. That's a big part of our job is opening and receiving. And that from that can naturally flow back to them gratitude. It can go either way. But this exchange of love and gratitude with them. And then to think of our Sangha, this one and all the other communities we belong to and have belonged to that are precious to us. We think of all these beings here with us. We also imagine that we're surrounded by our friends and loved ones and supporters, and that they are surrounded by their friends and loved ones and supporters. And that goes on and on and on into infinity until there are just an amazing number of beings who can benefit from this practice. And so to also think that anything you may have put into the chat box or anything you may have read in the chat box or anything that comes into your mind now, any one person, any collection of people, that you can put them all at Tara's feet. And with all that in mind, that we think to ourselves, we pray to ourselves, that for and with all of these beings, I am taking refuge in Tara's vast enlightened consciousness, in the teachers, in the teachings, in the wisdom texts, in my sanghas, in my communities, the lineages of our communities, the earth herself, and our own awakened consciousness. That we can take refuge in all these things. And then we really, 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 really feel our deep intention and wish that we could wake up 100% in order to be of benefit to all living beings. Imagine if you had that kind of power to be so awake that you could be of benefit to all living beings. And then we ask that all beings would have happiness and the causes of happiness, that all beings would be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. That all beings could actually come to realize we cannot be separated from the sacred happiness, which is sorrowless, that we might live in equanimity without too much attachment for those we hold close, or too much aversion for those we keep at a distance, that we could live believing in the equality of all that lives. Om Sabha Ashuta Sarva Dharma Sabha Ashuta Ham. And so now holding those prayers and intentions, really feeling the depth of those prayers and actually the protective nature of those prayers for us and all beings. We're going to invite dark red victorious Tara to come. She would be somewhere on the left, our left-hand side of Tara as we're facing Tara. To imagine that she is coming into the foreground. She is dark red in color. Some descriptions say almost black. And her expression is slightly wrathful. And she's holding her left hand at her heart in the gesture of refuge, which is so wonderful, thinking of taking refuge in her heart. And her right hand is extended in the gesture of supreme giving, meaning she gives us everything, including complete awakening. And that hand, in that hand, is resting a dark red vase, which completely enchants the Buddhas. And Buddhas is this, just wide variety of different kinds of beings, all kinds of beings. So even with this slightly wrathful expression, and she is sitting on a sun disk, not a moon disk, which is another clue of her wrathful nature. She's extremely beautiful, dressed in these amazing silks and jewels. And her top 3 chakras are adorned with the syllables Om Hum. And the blue syllable hum in her heart begins to radiate blue light. This direct beam of blue light into the realms of the wisdom beings and the initiatory deities, into these subtle realms, inviting them to come here at Hei Zahun Bamho. And this line comes from the original translation, which I really love. Because they promised to liberate all the beings from the ocean of existence through Tara's all-encompassing compassion, I remind them of their vow, and all the wisdom beings and initiatory deities come here. Again, Ahei Zahun Bamho. So all these beings, the Buddhas, the beings, their mandalas, the dakinis, all these awakened ones join us. And these awakened energy of all the Taras really fill out this visualization. And then we ask for purification. Om Sara Tathagata Abhishit Samam. And this is another really, it's just one part of the sadhana, but it's really a lovely piece of just asking for help, once again, to let go of any kind of sticky residue, any kind of negative energy, anything that is an obstacle energetically that may have gotten stuck in there somewhere because of some experience or some thought process. And then we just imagine now the white dakinis are pouring this liquid, like liquid light into our open crown chakra. And as they're doing that, all that stuff just flows out. I mean, you can picture that any way you want to picture it, but just to know that we're really getting this light bath from these powerful dakinis because we've asked for it from the awakened ones. We just imagine that flowing through us, and as it does, and as it leaves our bodies through the lower doors, all that sticky, icky, unpleasant, unhelpful energy leaves our bodies. And see however you want to see that or feel it or imagine it or think about it, to just let that happen. And then we imagine one of the dakinis pours that same nectar in the open crown chakra of dark red victorious Tara. This one little drop overflows and forms the Buddha Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light, who's now appearing just above her crown in a subtle body of red light. And I love his name. In Sanskrit, it means light without ceasing. And so here's a place where I like to imagine that we can make our personal offerings to Tara, like we can offer her everything. And especially with these wrathful deities, it's kind of nice to imagine offering her things that, you know, you find embarrassing or distasteful or whatever. But I mean, anything. She is glad that we offer her anything, actually, because she knows just what to do with it. And we can also offer our most personal, deepest wishes and our, maybe we did something this past week we're really happy about, or something beautiful happened we're really glad for. I saw my first hummingbird today. I'd like to offer that at the feeder. Just imagine you can offer her all your joys and all your sorrows, anything you want to offer her, and that she just takes it all. She's completely delighted to take it all, and that she has the power and the ability to transform anything we offer her into a wisdom blessing, giving us insight and understanding and, yeah, blessing. And however you want to imagine, she's just showering us with blessings, rose petals, however you want to see that. Om Ben Samrita Kundali Hana Hana Hampe Om Sabawashuda Sardama Sabawashudoham. And here is really, you know, all these pieces are so wonderful. You know, here is our opportunity. It's one more chance to get rid of one more set of obstacles, to just let ourselves imagine the blue wrathful deity Amrita Kundali emerging from our heart chakra and just gobbling up all the obstacles to our practice. And this can be kind of fun because you may know what some of your obstacles are. And just imagine you can toss them out there. And he's as happy to gobble them up as Tara is to accept all our offerings, because it's his job and he enjoys it. He's like Ganesh in Hinduism. He's a remover of all obstacles. And then he dissolves back in our heart chakra where he remains as a protector. And then we just take one moment to go back to that image of space, that image of vastness. And then to imagine that we can hear the vibration of the syllable Om, which is the syllable of enlightened consciousness. To take to heart the idea that it's constantly vibrating through space and matter at all times, whether we can actually hear it or not, that's happening. But we really, really pay attention to that vibration of the syllable Om, and that as it's vibrating, it's forming these phenomenally beautiful and quite large jeweled vessels. And each one of them has an Om inside of it. And now from these vessels are pouring the traditional offering substances that create kind of a banquet for Tara and all the Buddhas and all the beings of their mandalas. Food, water, music, incense, candles, flowers, so on. So we just imagine, which is really good for us, to imagine the most beautiful flowers, the most amazing food, like thousands of candles. You know, really use your imagination to see these offering substances just pouring out of these vessels, clear, unhindered, and unending. Om Aham, Om Aham, Om Aham. And then we invite all the beings to enjoy these. Om Aryatara, Sapariwara, Argan, Pajam, Puspe, Dupe, Alake, Ganje, Navaje, Shabda, Pratiche, Soha. So even though we're muted and the praise is in the chat box, let's read the praise together. I praise the one to whom Indra, Agni, Vayu, and the other powerful ones make offerings, who is honored by demons, zombies, and other harmful spirits who bow down before her. And so I'm going to say something about the mantra. You can see the mantras there too. It really means that we're just asking Tara to really pacify any kinds of beings that would disturb our practice. And that means this practice or the practices we do when we're not together, or even the what I call on the street practices of just being kind to someone, or whatever all the practices are that we do. So that's really what this mantra means, is asking Tara to do that, to dissolve all those obstacles and protect us from these demons and zombies and beings who actually turn to her with great admiration. So from the visualization, we have Tara from her heart in the vase, these dark red rays of light streaming out in the form of flames, going to all 10 directions, especially to the 10 directional protectors who are the lords of the Buddhas. And these are, if you're used to the language of devas and, earth spirits, etc., this is very much in line with that from the Tibetan tradition. So it's like these big overlord beings of all the other beings. And so this light is going out to the 10 directional protectors, and it's pacifying any ill will or negative intentions that could disturb us or anyone else or anybody that we're concerned about. And so our negative imprints are pacified, and the Buddhas, these beings, are subdued. So I want to say that's a complicated visualization. That's a lot to think about. And I really invite you not to try to think about all that, but in some sense, to just imagine this dark red light can come to you, can go to anybody that you're concerned about, that can really, really dissolve and pacify and shift these deep imprints that we've been talking about. And these complexes that love to get to us when we're in not so good spaces are really subdued. And you might translate that a little differently than I did, so I invite you to do that too. So again, even though we're muted, I would love it for y'all to chant the mantra with me, and also to invite you to just listen if that's more comfortable for you, or do some combination of both. Tare Tutarider Sarva Bigana Shatram Utsa Traya Soha. 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 Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Bigana Shatra Boots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sara Vigana Shatra Roots Tri Soha. So one of the things that I think Tara loves to do is give teachings in the silence. And there are always things that show up for me in the silence. I want to mention them. And there was also want to encourage you to really pay attention for the teachings that you might be receiving from the Tara that's inside of you, who's being magnified and animated by visualizing her in front of us. To really pay attention to what's coming into the foreground for you. And so one of the things that really I was reminded of is when we feel protected, like with this fierce, compassionate Tara, we really do feel safer in allowing these heavy duty emotions to come to the forefront. And even if it feels like a river of grief, which can feel pretty overwhelming, that sense of expansion can hold us and can hold all that. And it can help us remember, oh, how many other people have felt exactly the same way all throughout history, and how many people are feeling this way right now. Because that's one of the ways we are also connected to each other is through these big human emotions. And to also say that when we notice, like some of you mentioned earlier, oh, this happened and I didn't feel heard. Likewise, people often say, this happened, I didn't feel seen. I might as well not have even been there. That is so hard, especially if it's an old experience, because then we feel like we're not even sure we have a right to be here. And so when we let that come up, oh, I feel this way, and then we turn towards that, then we're actually seeing and hearing the part of us that was never seen or heard. And so we're bringing that, that experience to that part of ourselves. And this big wrathful Tara is holding us and protecting us so that we can do that. And, you know, as we continue to do the practice and we give ourselves these gifts of listening to ourselves, seeing ourselves, feeling these deep emotions, and we get more comfortable with that with ourselves, and we can do that for other people. And then we can give the gift of seeing and hearing and acknowledging and connecting. And we become Tara in the world. And yet, because we've done our own work, you could call it, but we've also given ourselves this gift, we're not sacrificing ourselves to do it. We've included ourselves already so that we can include others. So I'm sure there's much, much more. The teachings are really, truly infinite and endless. And I just encourage you to hear the teachings that are happening inside of you now. And so now we begin the process of ending the practice. You know, first of all, we look again at this dark red Tara and we just thank her for her powerful presence, and we see her receding back into her place in the mandala. And then we ask that all the beings who've come to join us, our teachers and the Buddhas and the enlightened ones and the friends and all the beings that we've invited to join us, we ask them to return to whatever realms they came from. And we thank them and we release them from our practice place and let them go. Now, you know, they don't go very far, but still, we do let them go. And then we see the entire mandala dissolve into light, this phenomenal display of light that just shines out into the entire universe, and that includes us. So we're absorbing all that light, and all that light is actually coming into our bodies and into our heart center, where our own Tara rests right there in our heart center, comes and joins the Tara that's already inside of us, really illuminates her even more. And as we see that light dispersing into space, then we're back where we started, just looking at this vastness, this amazing, amazing, infinite sea of potential. And we are resting in that. And then we dedicate the practice. We ask that whatever positive potential or goodness or merit has come from doing this practice together, we dedicate it towards the healing and awakening of all the beings and concerns and everything we put in the chat box, but we also dedicate it to the healing and awakening of all beings everywhere, with absolutely no exceptions. And we give thanks for Tara and the teachers and the practices and for being together. So I invite you all to slowly, slowly, slowly come back and to see if there's anybody who feels like sharing something, some of the teachings you might have gotten, or a question you might have. Yep, Susan.
There we go. I'm trying to unmute. Am I unmuted?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I just want to go back to the dissolving of the figure of Tara and all the beings into the light, because I had a visualization of that maybe a month or plus so ago. And what I got at that time was, as that light was going out, it was connecting with everything, including me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, it's a wonderful visualization for me to think of in connecting to others and to nature and to all that is out there and in here. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
You know, there actually another way of doing this practice, which is actually a little more traditional way of doing this practice, is you visualize the syllables Tom standing on a lotus throne, and that syllable Tom sends out light and touches absolutely everything.
Oh, that's lovely.
Universe. And the light comes back from from all that to the syllable Tom and transforms into Tara.
Oh, that's really lovely.
Yeah, that's an interesting. You you downloaded that.
I guess so.
So
good. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Anybody else?
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Allison. No, wait a minute. Who is this?
It was Kumiko.
Okay, keep talking, Kumiko. So there you are. Okay, now I see you. Hey.
Just wanted to mention that today, exactly a month ago, my dad passed away in Japan, and he had a brain stroke. So the bad part was mostly that he couldn't communicate, and because of the COVID, I'm in Canada, my mom in Japan, and but my mom couldn't really go see him much. And then I just imagining that, being without having somebody holding your hands, or I know he had consciousness somewhere deep, but he couldn't really express because his brain part wasn't working. Well, so I guess today's practice was that I was kind of feeling really sorry, thinking about how hard it must have been for him, just being really sort of so kind of being narrow, just not being able to feel the connection with anything, and frustrating. So today's practice basically kind of released my feeling of feeling sorry for him, because I was sort of doing that for him. So that Tara is still, even though he's gone from this realm, but Tara was still helping him to feel not to feel lonely and worried and frustrated. So yeah, it just made me feel much better now that I've done this practice, that I feel that my dad kind of felt a little sort of more compassion and all that he's hopefully not by himself trying to go through this new journey. And yeah, just wanted to share that. Thank you so much.
Kumiko, thank you so much for sharing that. And in the Tibetan tradition, this idea of being in the bardo for 49 days, and that we really can send them light. And one of my favorite bardo instructions, I haven't done it but so many times for people, but one of my favorite instructions is to say to the person, hey, look, if you get really scared, call on a holy being.
Yeah.
And I think you just did that. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really precious. Thank you. What is his name?
His name is Kaoru.
Okay, Kaoru. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
May I speak?
Yes, Kylie.
Hi. Thank you so much, Rachel. I just want to go back to the first part of the questions. I couldn't think of what I wanted to say, but it was when I feel my most aloneness is when I'm in pain. When I was young, when I had lots of avenues for engagements and lots of people, I really isolated myself. And now as I'm getting older, I feel like I'm really alone. And then when I have chronic pain, I just go into desperation. But where I get solace is sitting with people who hold space for me and have a shared reality, but they don't tell me what to do. They don't tell me, there's no tit for tat story. Oh, well, yeah, this is what happened to me. Like, I need to be heard. And then they'll come back with their awful story. And it's like, it just adds to it. So that's where I'm starting to find people that I can just do that for and do that with. And it's just so needed. And yeah, so I love this. I love this Sangha. Thank you so much.
That's
Rachel.
beautiful. Thank you, Kylie. And somebody wants your email because they want to talk to you about embroidering Tara.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love to have a little craft group. Oh,
Okay, so who was the person asking? Who asked for Kylie's email? Are you still here? Because I said I, would need to ask you, but anyway, maybe they have already left.
oh well, if they ask again.
If they ask again, I'll send them your email address.
I'm very good at needlework, so I'd love to share that with it.
Okay.
Sit and have a group.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah. So Chris has a hand up.
Yes. Yes, I do. Hold on one second. I'm unmuted, right?
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The little girl that spoke in regards to her father dying alone.
Yeah, she's not a little
She
girl.
reached out to me because I wanted to. Well, I didn't, the young woman.
Yeah.
But she's like precious little girl. But anyways, to let her know, I just lost my mother-in-law from COVID, alone in a hospital. So you're in the right community. My heart goes to you, and I can't put my shoes in your feet because she wasn't my dad, but I lost my dad 34 years ago. My mom, 5 years this Christmas. So my mother-in-law was the last of our generation at 90, and she did get COVID, and she was alone. We couldn't be there. In fact, we're going to have a service at the cemetery in the middle of May. And I just got vaccinated, which makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, although I'll still be very protective. So you're not alone. And there's been so many, but I just hope this helps to soften your heart, because they're not alone. There's so many that were in the same situation, and I know they've come together and they're stronger. And I'm sure that maybe you'll receive a sign that he's okay. So I just wanted to share my love for you, and I really know what you're going through. So you take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Does anybody else want to say something?
Hi, Rachel. It's Kirsten.
Hi, Kirsten.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I wanted to share this practice. I so appreciate the wrathful deity, the emanation, that it somehow, for me, it's very comforting that it really encompasses what I experience as sort of the real intensities of the human part of my experience in life, and then the gnarly bits, and at the same time holds this expansion and connection to everything, as Susan spoke so beautifully about, that there's both of these things, as you spoke about, Young, talking about this dynamic tension, that really is, it's this infinite experience of these energetic beings, but we're also finite in our humanness and all of that means. I just felt today particularly just so grateful for that, the wrathful element, the willingness to take on all of those parts of the human experience and hold that with and for us.
Thank you. And that also means that you're holding it too. So I think, thank yourself.
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But doing that in a practice and having the visual components to it as well is one of the things I do appreciate about particularly the Tibetan model of that to be able to see it, to be able to feel it, to be able to embody it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you for that. One thing that came to me while we're meditating, I said that article, the National Geographic, was a really long time ago. And the article was about the Oglala Lakota. And that just came back to me, the picture of the magazine. Anyway, I just want to mention that Luther Standing Bear and Black Elk were both Oglala Lakota. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was that, which I started to say at the beginning, I didn't know why they are ordered the way they're ordered, but it really occurred to me last month. We were talking about red hum sounding Tara can help you set boundaries. And I thought, well, the way this one is connected to that is that sometimes we really need to say no. We really need to set a boundary. We really, really, really need to say no. And we're scared to do it because we might be lonely or it might cause problems or whatever. So I think, having wrathful Tara be someone we can have a conversation with about, I got to figure out how to say no so I can have some of this time to myself and experience the joys of solitude. So I just want to mention that. So it's getting close to time to quit. And I just wonder if anybody has one more thing to close us out.
May I just say that I've put my email for Kylie in the chat box,
Okay.
if she can see it there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Susan. Excellent. So, anybody else before we sign off for this month?
I'd like to share something.
Okay.
I don't know why I didn't put it together, but when I was visualizing the part where the mandala dissolves, I saw this like amazing network of this like jeweled net, and then I was reminded of Indra.
Mm-hmm.
Is the jeweled net of Indra.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, wow, okay. So I encourage everyone to look that reference up if you're not aware of the jeweled net of Indra. And then I thought, oh, so Indra bows to this emanation of Tara. And I thought, of course, and I don't know enough anything, but this setting of the 10 directions and all of that, the power of that, I don't know, that it seemed even more vast possibly than the net in a way. So I just had that amazing thought. And I thought about that connectedness of the net. This idea that we're all beings are part of that net, and we're all just dissolving back into that, where I don't know, it was like I saw the image very powerfully, so I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. I like the idea that it's jeweled. We can think of ourselves as jewels in the net.
Yeah, each intersection is a jewel. Just
and to say finally, to close out, the Buddhist and Hindu Tantra were developing at the same time, and Tara still exists in India. So it's not surprising to hear the mention of some of the other Hindu gods. But really the idea is bowing to this infinite vast consciousness. And in this feminine form, wow, it's infinitely interesting and inspiring. So thank you all for coming. And, I just want to encourage you, keep listening for your own teachings inside yourselves. And keep coming back. And thank you for everybody who really shared with us, and wishing you all well, and especially those of you who've lost dear ones. It's a lot going on. Yeah. So thanks to everyone, and see you next month. And take good care. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Feel free to unmute and say goodbye on your way out.
Thank you. Goodbye and thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye and thank you.